Welcome to Biology, the Center Study of Life. Community ecology. What's a community? On our next walk through a field of woodland or even across a campus or a park, try to observe some of the interactions between the species present. You might see birds using trees as nesting sites, bees pollinating flowers, spiders trapping insects in their webs, ferns growing on shade provided by trees. A teeny sample of the many interactions between species that exist in an ecological theater. In addition to the physical and chemical factors discussed in chapter 15, and organisms environment includes biotic factors over individuals of the same species as well as individuals of other species, such as assemblage of populations of various species living close enough for potential interaction is called a biological community. Ecologists define the boundaries of a particular community to fit their research questions. They might study, for example, the community of decomposers and other organisms living on a rotting log, the benthic community in Lake Superior, or in community of trees and shrubs in Shenandoah National Park, the various animals as well as the grass and trees surrounding the watering hole in this figure. Are all this figure as we see a savanna community in Goba National Park, Botswana, are all members of savanna community in Southern Africa. Community, we will examine the factors that are most significant in structuring a community, in determining how many species there are overall, which particular species are present, and the relative abundance of these species. We began with a fundamental factor influencing community structure, the interactions between the organisms in a community. A community's interactions include competition, predation, herbivory, symbiosis, and disease. Some key relationships in the life of an organisms are its interactions with other species in the community. Ecologists refer to these relationships as interspecific interactions. We will start with the simplest situation, interactions between populations of just two species. The possible interactions that can link species include competition, predation, herbivory, symbiosis, parasitism, mutualism, and commensalism, and disease. Here we will use the symbol positive and negative, or positive and negative, to indicate how each interspecific interaction affects survival and reproduction of the two species engaged in affects survival and reproduction of two species engaged in the interaction. For example, the mutualism, the survival and reproduction of each species, is increased in the presence of the other. Therefore, this is a positive interaction. Predation is an example of positive negative interaction with the positive effect on the survival and reproduction of the predator population, and a negative effect on the pre-population. As zero indicates that the population is not affected by the interaction in any known case. Historically, most ecological research has focused on interactions with a negative effect on at least one species, such as competition and predation. However, positive interactions are ubiquitous, and their contributions to community structure are the subject of much study. Competition. Interspecific competition occurs when species compete for a particular resource that is in short supply. For instance, The weeds growing in a garden compete with garden plants for soil nutrients and water. Grasshoppers and bison in the Great Plains compete for the grass they both eat. Lynx and foxes in the northern forests of Alaska and Canada compete for prey such as snowshoe hares. In contrast, some resources such as oxygen are rare in short supply. Thus, although almost all species use their resource, they do not compete for it. When two species do compete for a resource, the results is detrimental at both species. Negative. A strong competition can lead to the local elimination of the two competing species, a process called competitive exclusion. The competitive exclusion principle in 1934, Russian ecologist G.F. Gause studied the effects of interspecific competition in laboratory experiments with two closely related species of protists, Paramecium ularia and Paramecium caudatum. He cultured the protists under stable conditions with a constant amount of food added every day. When goes agree the two species of separate cultures, each population grew rapidly and then leveled off at what was apparently the carrying capacity of the culture. But when goes cultured the two species together, P. cotidium was driven to extinction. The culture cause inferred that P. ularia had a competitive edge in obtaining food, and he concluded that two species competing for the same limited resources cannot coexist in the same place. One species will use the resources more efficiently and thus produce more rapidly than the other. Even a slight reproductive advantage will eventually lead to local elimination of the inferior competitor. Ecologists call Gause's concept the competitive exclusion principle. Ecological niches, the sum total of a species use the biotic and abiotic resources in its environment, is called the species ecological niche. One way to grasp the concept through an analogy made up ecologist Eugen Odom of an organism's habitat is its address. The niche is the organism's profession, but another way an organism's niche is its ecological role, how it fits into an ecosystem. For example, the niche of tropical tree lizards consists of, among many components, the temperature range in tolerance, the size of the branches, one on which it breaches, the time of day when it is active, and the sizes and kinds of insects it eats. We can use the niche concept to illustrate the competitive exclusion um, principle. Two species cannot coexist in a community of their niches are identical. However, ecological similar species can coexist in community if there are one or more significant differences in their niches. As a result, competition, a species fundamental niche, which is a niche potentially occupied by that species, may be different forms of different from its released niche. The niche is actually occupies in a particular environment.